You just saw the three components of trust. You also saw how effective leaders develop those three things to create trusting environments. Now we want to talk about something called the enemies of trust. Even well-meaning leaders sometimes fall into these traps, and we want to make sure that we can restore trust when we do fall into those traps. In this segment, you're going to see how that process works.
Here are the things that we try and create a trusting environment, and these are the things that violate it, okay? Inconsistent messages. Inconsistent messages. One staff member gets told one thing, another staff member gets told another thing. And similar to our clear expectations and our clear standards, inconsistent standards. That is, if we've got these sort of vague standards and you and I are playing favorites, nothing is going to frustrate people more than this feeling that, well, one person gets treated one way, one person gets treated another. The other thing that's going to frustrate people is if you've got different standards for yourself. I had a job where we had a boss, we had these meetings that we had to be on time at, Tuesday mornings, 8 a.m. And we were chided when we were late to these meetings, and yet, even if we had a good excuse, and yet this same boss, when he would show up late to these meetings, oh, it's because I ran into so-and-so, oh, it's because this happened. There's clearly an inconsistent standard there, and there was no trust because of it. There's also this idea of misplaced benevolence, right? It's this idea that well, I've got one employee that's not performing well, and everybody knows it, but I want to be kind to them. I want to be good to them. So instead of holding them accountable, I am benevolent towards them. I just sort of let them go because they're having a hard time in their personal life. While I'm all for benevolence and kindness, what is happening to the trust of all your other employees who are doing their jobs, who are doing their jobs well? Trust is going to break down for them. Now, the next one is pretty obvious here. An enemy of trust is when we don't trust people. We don't take that leap of faith and give them new responsibilities and trust them to not be micromanaged or whatever it might be. So that's pretty obvious. But the other one is kind of interesting. We also damage trust when we are too trusting. So we're trying to find a happy medium here. Too trusting means we give people more than they are ready to handle. And we just say, nope, you're on your own, you can do it, I trust you, you got it, and we sort of take this laissez-faire approach. There's no trust there. All we feel is that we've been left out on an island. Before I started my graduate work, I moved to the mainland. I worked for one of my best friends. His dad is a psychologist, and he runs this business called North Shore Mental Health. And he hires these college-age students to work with kids with, mental disabilities and other things. And I wasn't a psych major or anything, but he said, yeah, Dan, you need a good job during the summer, so why don't you come work for me? And he assigned me to work with this 3-year-old severely autistic boy. I had no training, no ability. And I told him, like, look, I'm a little nervous here. I don't know what to do. No, you got it. No worries, Dan. You can do it. After the second day, I came back and said, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't think I'm good for this kid. I'm having problems. He's having problems. No, Dan, you got it. You can do it. And after the third day, to be honest with you, I just quit. And as much as I appreciated him trusting me to be able to handle it and his benevolence in that case, I couldn't do it. I had to stop. I didn't trust myself. I didn't trust him. The next two are avoiding elephants in the room. Look, if everyone knows, this is similar to not avoiding unpleasant realities. If everyone knows that Jimmy was fired for sexual harassment or something, the next time you have a team meeting, talk about it. Don't avoid the elephant in the room. Okay, everyone is saying, like, oh my gosh, Jimmy got fired. Okay, by the way, if anyone listening is named Jimmy, it's purely coincidental. Okay, and then finally, communication vacuums. If you and I are not communicating enough, people will fill those vacuums, right? They will fill those vacuums. Now, I want to go back to one thing here because I'm going to go back a slide here to trustability because I want to give you what I think is a great example, and I do this with permission. Our current executive director here at the Department of Human Resource Management, Debbie Cragen, she was recently diagnosed with cancer. And I was really impressed. That's not an easy thing to share. She knew she was going to have to go through chemo. She knew she was going to have to go through radiation. She's probably going to lose her hair, things like that. Debbie immediately sent out something to the entire agency, being very candid, sharing information forthrightly and with transparency, saying, I trust you with this information. even though she was a very new executive director, just recently appointed by the governor, probably feeling maybe insecure about her position, as we all would, yet saying, guys, I have cancer. I'm fully confident we can get through this. Here's what's happening. Here's what I'm afraid of. Here's how I'm going to handle this. And I was really impressed by that. Here's what was even more impressive to me in terms of being the first to trust. Maybe a month or so after this announcement, Debbie set up a policy. Instead of saying, doing something promoting cancer awareness because it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month and things like that, Debbie said, by the way, I've set up a thing where you all get admin leave if you are going to do something for preventative care. In other words, if you're going to see a doctor, because there's something you're concerned about and you want to be preventative and still waiting too long, you get admin leave for that. Now, she's trusting people not to abuse that admin leave, but she's also treating people like they matter. She's saying, I was very fortunate enough that we caught the cancer early. It's probably going to be a very successful diagnosis long term, and I want to afford you that same opportunity. How do you think the people in DHM are going to respond to that? Very positively, because she's creating an environment of trust. Her deputy director, they also send out every bit of information that is not proprietary. They send out, they say, look, this is what's happening with the governor's office. They keep people in the loop, and I know that's something they've intentionally tried to do. That's increasing the environment of trust here at the Department of Human Resource Management. Okay, now we talked about those enemies of trust. Nietzsche, many of you are familiar with. You can see there that, once you break that trust, it's hard to get back, right? And if you don't give that trust, you don't receive that trust, from Lao Tzu, founder of Taoism. So what we want to talk about now is what we do, and I got to do this quickly, to restore trust. The good news is that the formula is really quite simple. It's integrity and intentions and ability. Make sure you're doing all those things, plus all these trustability behaviors we talked about. Okay, you've got to do all those things. It's not rocket science. You've got to do those trusting behaviors, and then you need to create what is called a trust audit. So the trust audit's not going to matter if you're not doing those behaviors, if you don't have integrity, pure intentions, and if you don't have some sort of capacity, some sort of ability that gives you the trust of your people, right? So what is a trust audit? Well, really, it's pretty quite simple. You need to, when there has been a major trust loss, you have to go and investigate. You have to figure out what happened. And this seems so painfully obvious, but to be honest with you, it's harder than you think. Figure out what happened, what really, and not really what people are just saying happened, but what was really the violation of the trust, and then determine the depth and the breadth of the trust loss, because you might feel it's only 6 inches deep, and then you find out, no, the trust loss here actually goes much deeper than that. And I'm a new supervisor here, but in this unit that I'm a new supervisor for, there's been a lack of trust here for years, and this latest thing is just a straw that broke the camel's back. So you want to really figure out the depth and the breadth there. Then, as we talked about earlier, own up to the violation quickly instead of ignoring or downplaying it. Don't say, oh, well, there's a new sheriff in town, so we're doing it. No, say, look, talk about it. Say, guys, there's a lack of trust here. How do we build it back? And then find out what you have to do to build back that trust. Okay? Find out what you must do and do it. Now, I think the greatest organizational example of doing a trust audit and then restoring trust is Tylenol. Many of you have heard this story before. In 1982, 7 people were killed in Chicago after taking cyanide-laced capsules of extra-strength Tylenol. Now, that's a business killer, right? But what Tylenol did, this was going to kill Johnson & Johnson, who was the mother company, because Tylenol was a big part of their sales. But what they did is immediately they went through a trust audit and they recalled millions, 31 million bottles of Tylenol. Now, this sounds like, well, no duh to us today, but before 1982, recalls didn't really happen. That was they're sort of the pioneers of recalls, and Tylenol, because of this recall, because of being very candid with the public and saying this is what happened, being very honest with them and doing this trust audit, they were able to get their market share back up pretty quickly. They did the trust audit and they restored trust. So again, what you and I cannot do is feel, well, trust has been violated, there's nothing I can do about it. There's a lot of people that have that false notion, and yet as difficult as it is to fill that bucket back up again, it can happen. Now, the smartest thing in the world is just not to kick the bucket over in the first place. But sometimes that's happened before you. Sometimes you've done it intentionally, and sometimes you've only kicked the bucket over just a little bit. But know that when you do, there is redemption. You and I can restore that trust, however difficult it might be, but we can do it. Look at this from the Great Places to Work Institute. It says that our approach is based on the major findings of 20 years of research. That trust between managers and employees is the primary defining characteristic of the very best places to work. We want our agencies to be the best places to work. We're not going to be able to, we never have been, never will be able to compete with the private sector in terms of money. So we have to find our competitive advantage elsewhere in terms of recruiting talent, retaining talent, and providing better service to the public. And I really believe that this trust, this principle of trust, is that sort of common thread that matters to all of leadership. Leadership does not happen unless there is a trusting environment, both in an individual one-on-one between you and the supervisor and the employees, as well as trust within the organization. We need to establish those things, and I'm fully convinced that as we do, we will see better results. That's the evidence. There's no reason why that doesn't apply to state of Utah agencies. If there is a more trusting environment, we see more job satisfaction, better motivation, better productivity, less turnover, less absenteeism, more organizational citizenship behaviors, all these things that our agencies cannot afford to be without. We have to lead the way, lead the market in those kinds of positive work environments. I'm entirely convinced that it's up to you and me as supervisors to create those environments. And we do it by creating environments of trust.